With the compositions locked, we are now moments away from Rogue versus the Mad Lions.
You really have to wonder what was going through the mind of the coaches during a draft like this.
You fool. How could you leave the stage allowing me to pick a champion as broken as Seraphine?
You think you outsmarted me? Classic mistake. I've known about your Seraphine pick for ages now. Clearly you're unaware of the recent changes to Serpent's Fang. I'm sure that my Zed bot will put them to good use.
That would be clever, Mac, but I already did my research on your players. They're all far too selfish to build Serpent's Fang. They'd rather have more flat AD.
Freddy, I am their coach. Of course I know how to deal with situations like this. I prepared a presentation that outlined all the fake changes to Serpent's Fang. They'll be dying to buy it by the end of it.
But what will you do when they read the actual patch notes?
We both know that pro players don't read, Freddy. Don't be ridiculous.
Well, Mac, it appears you've got me cornered. Or would if I hadn't selected Tom Kench as my first pick.
Oh no.
Yes, it is easy in your euphoric state to forget the power of the catfish. I've had this one prepped in secret for months by only the best analysts in the world.
Oh, are those the same analysts whose PayPals I've received and have since been compensating handsomely to convince you to pick trash champions?
Those weren't analysts you sent money to. Those were struggling artists who I commissioned to draw this picture of your face when you found out the truth.
Cute. While you've been playing your little art jokes, I've had a man infiltrate on the inside to tear apart at the very fabric of your team. How will Hans Sommer perform, I wonder, as he has anime's trash whispered into his ear every night?
Anime is trash.
And that might have worked, Mac, but we've had your house bugged for months. We saw this coming from a mile away.
Yeah, but how could you even hope to understand us when we were only speaking in Spanish?
Freddy hablo español.
So that's how you knew to use the Nunu counter pick.
Of course. Oh, Mac, you were always one step behind.
Except there's one fatal flaw to your plan, Freddy. I am Nunu. I knew you were listening. I knew you could speak Spanish, and it was all to get you into this final trap. Now an Inspired is feeding relentlessly, and he says that he can't control his champion. Who will believe him?
I'll admit, Mac, that was a twist I was not ready for. Maybe you will take this game. And maybe in some weird way I'll take some joy or satisfaction in it. After all, we have spent so much time together. The games, the tender moments, the walkies.
The walkies? No. No, it's impossible!
But it is possible, Mac. I know all of your secrets, because I am your best friend. I am your fur baby. I am brave! And this is why you will always be one step behind, until you learn to give everything to the draft.
Wait. I picked up your poop for months. That's disgusting.
It's a very good question, Vedius. You really have to be willing to believe some wild stuff for this to make any sense.
This is the worst draft I think I have ever seen.
Welcome to Berlin, Germany, home of the LEC and the weirdest content this side of the equator. Coming into the penultimate week of the regular season, it is upon us, and the race for playoffs is getting closer and closer towards a massive crescendo. XL Esports and Schalke 04 have fallen very quickly in the standings, and they face off in a game that neither can afford to lose. I am your host, Quickshot, in full reunition with my boys Guldborg and Ender. I've missed you, Mr. Fryson.
I don't know if that's a word,
It
but yeah, I missed you too. And honestly, I was really excited for today up until my immersion got ruined at the end of that cold open. I was on board, right? Like, obviously, coaches probably thinking a lot of those things, but then the casters weren't wearing headsets at the end. And
Thank
that doesn't
you.
make any sense.
I saw that too. They're slacking. Dracos and Vedius, come on, take notes. All right. Last week, we saw Fnatic and Rogue. They secured their spot in the summer playoffs today. Misfits are looking to join them with a win. Looking back at last week, though, and you see the standings on your screen, the icing on the cake was Fnatic versus G2. I mean, Guldborg, what did you think of the game?
Yeah, I definitely felt like it was a bit back and forth. G2 in the beginning had some clear strengths, but then moving on to let me just pause before mentioning Fnatic's strength in towards this one. They clearly had some good ideas coming into this one with the casters pick from Guldborg as well to kind of try to neutralize the composition we saw coming out from G2 as well. But my big highlight player from this series was actually Upset. A guy when going up against Reckless has always been undermined, but this time around, he was the one that came out ahead.
And so many times I feel like Fnatic G2 games come down to these scrappy fights. You know, so many times this ends up happening. You mentioned Upset. He performed so well. I feel like Whippos Karthus also just pumped out an absurd amount of damage. Hylissang did a lot of really clever engages with his Hex Splash too. That wasn't the only one that was able to catch off G2 off guard. So Fnatic were able to come ahead in those scrappy fights, and it's showing a big difference, I feel like, in the Fnatic versus G2 in 2021 is that Fnatic are the team that is looking much stronger in the team fights. And Yamato Cannon, let's get a check on that wall. Let's see if that's not got a coal or two in it, because he was slamming that thing.
It absolutely does. The damage is there. We're sending in the bill a little bit later. I mean, Fnatic haven't 2-0 G2 since spring of 2018. They are looking on form. Now, SK Gaming, on the other hand, they looked lost. They were absolutely nowhere to be seen. And somehow they pull out a 2-0 week. I mean, Ender, explain this to me.
I mean, look, SK had a really rough start to the season, and they all were also marred by a couple of different roster swaps, you know? Jez's being in the roster at the start, them not being able to get blue for week 1. So I feel like now the team is having a real shot at building up some synergy, getting the same 5 players onto the starting roster. I think that Lilith has performed pretty well for a rookie coming onto the stage, working with the rest of the team too. I think that Treats has a little bit of bonus there, being a former support, learning how to work with him, and you can see them ganging up on Humanoid in the mid lane, predicting the flash too. Beautiful stuff coming out from Lilith. And you can't forget that SK was a standout team in the spring split. I think a lot of people were shocked to see them make roster changes at all, and I'm glad to see them find some semblance of success, even if it is coming very late in the season here.
And to me, really, one of the key things as well was finding this keyword. Proactivity for SK Gaming was something they lacked in the past. This time around in the early game, they're not afraid to start these engages. That's been very good with teleports towards skirmishes in the bot side of the map. And the thing with SK is, once they get a lead, once they finally get ahead, they're actually really solid at keeping it. Now, the counterpart to that is that when they don't get a lead, they're not so solid at getting those victories. They don't usually come back. But once again, the proactivity, the willingness to be the one to pull the trigger is what is gaining SK some of these victories.
And on the stage as well. I mean, Ender was talking a lot about Lilith, made his debut here on the stage, one of the first games back, one of the first players under the lights. It's very, very impressive. And of course, with their wins, it's taken a big shakeup in the race for playoffs. Now, it does feature 5 different teams currently fighting for one spot. So for this next segment, I want to ask who has momentum in the race. And I'm just going to assume that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are already locked, meaning 6 through 10 are who myself, Guldborg, and Ender are going to talk about. Who do you have your eyes on as securing that 6th and final spot here, Guldborg?
Yeah, I'm looking at a lot of miracle teams right here, but to me, the biggest miracle team is Astralis, but not for the reason you think it is. No, Astralis consistently needs miracles to win their games when I'm watching them play. They're always so far behind from the early game heading into the mid game, and when they're winning, it's by backdoors, it's by finding victories when they're 3k deficit behind in gold. I don't understand how, but it happens.
They're not going to do it and I'll tell you why they're not going to do it. All right, my boys XL are going to take the 6th spot. Now, I don't care what happened last week, right? I bought my tickets 2 weeks ago, where even though they lost both of those games, and yes, they are 0-4 in the last 2 weeks, the 2 losses they had to significantly stronger opponents were actually pretty good. And you know, they play Astralis, and they play Vitality, and they looked pretty good in the previous games earlier in the season. I think XL have had 2 weeks of bad form, but I do think out of the competition around them, that they are half a step to a step ahead of everybody else, and I'm pegging them to take number 6.
Quickshot. I've got a couple of questions to ask you. First of all, how long have you been doing your job?
2012. We're going on 9 years. Where are you going with this?
Okay. And how long have you been casting Excel?
As long as they've existed.
And how many times have they made playoffs?
Why? What? Like what? Fine, 0.
And it's gonna stay that
now.
way. Okay,
it's
look,
changing now.
Trevor, here's the thing. Look, Excel, you know, maybe, but they're already a game behind Astralis and Vitality, and my money is on Vitality for what it's worth. Look, this team came in with a little bit of a bang, and I feel like if you're looking across the board, this is the team with the best shot, especially bringing in Shigenda now that I know they haven't gotten a lot of wins since they put him on the team, but they also had a really hard strength of schedule since getting him, and their game against SK, I think, was the best indicator for how they're going to do into this playoffs race coming towards the end of the season. I think we got to see a very proactive Selfmade in the early game, playing around the top side of this map, and I think this is going to be the key to success for Vitality. Selfmade getting active in the early game, playing around Leader and Shigenda, because you know Crownshot is going to be showing up as a carry in those later stages. He's going to be fine down on that bottom side of the map, so if they get their stuff in order in the early game, they are going to be just fine.
I do not like being used as a prop in your argument, young man. That was not fun for me. But of course, everybody at home, let us know who you think is going to be able to take that 6th and final spot. I am XL, he's Astralis, he's wrong with Vitality, and of course, XL are going to be both of them. Now, this week, Ashley Kang is returning to the LEC, and for those of you that don't know her, Ashley is a phenomenal interviewer. She's also an expert on the LCK Korean League of Legends scene. So, Ashley, you're joining us from Seoul once again. What can you tell us about the state of the LCK right now, and why are DK not winning?
Okay, for people who haven't been tuning into the LCK, big news, Damwon Kia is actually not on top of the LCK standing. I think 2 things happened. Number 1, the meta shifted towards less jungle carry and more bot lane carry, which kind of broke the existing synergy that Damwon Kia used to have. And also, the bot lane of the team is kind of struggling right now. So they're kind of contesting 4th place in the LCK alongside Liv Sandbox. Above them, we have T1, who have recently been making resurgence. Genji Esports, who have just been knocked down from the 1st place by Nongsin Red Force, who sits on top of the LCK.
Oh, you just said T1 are making a resurgence. That makes me very happy. I saw recently that FLICKR just played his 650th LCK game. How is FLICKR and obviously the rest of T1 doing as we're heading later into summer?
Like, I don't like saying FLICKR is back because I don't really feel like the unkillable Demon King truly went away, but he is definitely back in peak because if you look at the stats, he has the biggest goal difference in the LCK for the first 15 minutes. That's higher than Chobi or Showmaker. Also, he has been stepping up as the main shot caller for T1, which has kind of been working perfectly because T1 has been fielding more rookies like Gumayusi, Keria, Ona, who are like 18 or 19 years old. So I really love this cute narrative where this is like a team of FLICKR who is like a living legend and a veteran surrounded by 4 rookies performing super well who might actually end up becoming new FLICKR in a few years' time.
Oh, I absolutely love the way you say that. FLICKR may have never left, and I'm inclined to agree with you there. Maybe the rest of T1 has rejoined him. Maybe that's an idea to explore. Let's pretend for a second I've not seen any LCK at all. I don't know any of the teams. What is an NS, and how are they the new LCK super team?
Okay, so if Nongsim is a relatively new team, but if you don't recognize the name Nongsim Red Force, you will definitely recognize the name Peanut because Peanut is the veteran of the team as he is surrounded by relatively younger players like Guri, Dukdam, and Rich. But what I love about Nongsim is the power of friendship, as the LCK casters would love to say, because this is not a flashy team that wins lanes at level 2, but has insane team fights. Some people draw comparisons to 2019 Griffin with them. So if they keep performing with this consistency, we might see another Suning going into 2021 Worlds a relatively unknown team in a major region who might just end up making it all the way to top.
I think it's so crucial that you actually highlight the power and the value and the impact that a team that synergizes well, that complements one another can have, you know, like a Power Rangers Megazord or a Gotron Weasel Robot, you know what I mean? Okay, so you're obviously making it clear that you think LCK are going to win Worlds. Like, I can hear the bias.
No, I'm not that biased, Travis.
So what's the gap between the LEC and the LCK right now?
Okay, my huge LCK bias aside and as a neutral perspective,
That's so hard, I can hear it, I can hear it.
I actually honestly don't believe that gap is too big right now because there isn't a single dominant team in the LCK like we had in 2020 Summer Down One or 2015-2016 SKT. Like, Mad Lions took Damagear all the way to 5 games back in the MSI semifinals, and I see a variety of playstyles in both LEC top teams and the LCK top teams. I still think the LCK is a bit ahead, especially in terms of consistency, but I don't think the gap is that big. Maybe if I had to say a number and trigger all the Reddit fans, maybe 60-40.
I love it that you hear the hesitation. Do I say a number? I'm not sure I want to. I didn't plan this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Ashley, thank you so much for giving us insight on LEC and LCK. I'm looking forward to your interviews all weekend long. Now, this week we got a brand new episode of Pop Quiz, and the usually unbeatable Bwipo was challenged by the king of solo queue. We'll see you later, Ashley.
Spectral Maw.
Spectral what?
Spectral Maw. Mordekaiser.
Spectral Maw.
Diego's W.
Oh my god.
Spectral Maw. That's Diego W.
Crescent Guard.
Croissant God? That's what you said, bro.
Crescent.
Guard. So it has to be something that protects. Braum?
I think it's like a shield spell.
Yoni.
Crescent Guard.
Xin Zhao's ult.
What? Crescent Guard.
Xin Zhao R.
What? Seer, spelled S-E-A-R.
S-E-A-R? Seer? Man, what are these names?
No way, that's an ability. What? How am I this bad at this?
I don't know, Sejani.
Man, this is hard.
Everyone will say brand, but I will not because I think I'm getting debated. But I'm thinking of something hot.
Seer, S-E-A-R.
Brand's Q.
Hallowed Mist.
Hallowed Mist. I mean, again, the champions that come to mind is Viego, it's Yorick, it's...
Oh, Senai.
What?
Oh yeah, I know that. It's Senna. Viego, it's Viego still. Wait, it has to be Senna.
Viego E. But is there more Mist champions?
Hallowed Mist.
I mean, it's one of the Shadow Isles champs,
Yes.
but like, who has Hallowed Mist?
Hallowed Mist. That's Gwen's W.
Is Gwen's W?
Yes.
Ah, so tricky. Like, oh.
Flare.
Leona. What? Corky.
Oh god, man. Why is this so hard? Smear Q.
Yes.
I know the champion. Now it's just to guess which thing it is. Samir's passive. But props to the people that name these abilities, man. Like, they are so accurate.
For the first time ever, Bwipo is unseated as the king of Pop Quiz. Congratulations, Magi Felix. You and I were in fact tied for score because I had the same number of correct answers.
You legit just told me
Last
you got Flair
week,
wrong.
we saw a new champion rise in the middle. Shut up. What's off camera stays off camera. As Irelia returned to pro play after her recent buffs. I'm going to go to Ender first. How strong is the will of the blade, and does she have any weaknesses, Mr. Frierson?
Well, she does have weaknesses, but she's also very, very powerful. I think we saw her getting picture banned in about half of the games that we had last weekend, more often than not as a counter pick, although I think she was blinded once into the top lane. But her changes did move her more into a mid lane position. You know, back when Aurelia originally got reworked, she came out and was one of the strongest mid laners back in 2018. And Riot did their changes to, you know, shift her back into the top lane where she belonged. And then they decided, you know what, forget that. She can be a mid laner again. Here's some magic reduction on her W once more. It scales up super nicely. They also smoothed out a lot of the scaling on her kit, so it's not like super early level breakpoints, but like her Q scales up with damage all the way to level 18, the damage reduction on W all the way to 18 too. She can be a big menace, especially in the later stages of the game.
Yeah, I completely agree with Endo. We've already seen it tear up different solo queue. You see names like Chovy in Korea, even one-trick ponies like Aurelia King, who's also just tearing it up with what they essentially call a nuke W, where you just charge it up, you get some insane amounts of damage onto them. It's not even that skillful. Passive decreased as well, super easy to proc it. Laning phase can still be sort of tough in some matchups where you need to get out, but as soon as you're out on the map in a side lane, like you just tear it up. It's basically uncontested at this point.
I mean, last weekend, Niski and Larson obviously played her in the mid lane and showed some skill. But Broken Blade in the top lane had a little bit more of a difficult time in that matchup. I'm very interested to see how it continues to play out. I mean, Guldborg, do you think she'll remain high priority as we go into week 7?
I at least think for now, it is with a lot of these new champions that come in that teams either they just have a huge priority onto them, it's because they haven't really found a counter for it, so either they ban it or they find a counter along the way. But so far we're only 1 week into this one, so I'm still struggling to see if any team is going to come out with a clear definitive counter. But obviously there are still old ones like the Renekton or something like that you could bring out and flex against her.
Yeah, you can definitely put it into the mid lane. We see that a lot over in the LPL, and I feel like Aurelia is just one of those champions that as a melee champion in the mid lane, she's so strong at fighting in the river, roaming out of the lane, getting into these skirmishes, and a lot of the meta these days, it does revolve around fighting around that mid lane. She also sets up super nicely with her E for junglers to come in for ganks, and one thing that you might actually take for granted with Aurelia is her E is super hard to dodge. A lot of the times, even in the top lane, you would see champions going for very early boots just to be able to get away from that spell. Keep in mind, ranged champions on average, lower movement speed than melee champions. So in the mid lane against a lot of these picks, it's going to be really hard to dodge away from her abilities, especially when she's extending that range by jumping onto minions with her Q.
I do think it's beautiful to watch when all those skill shots land. We'll see whether or not we'll see Aurelia throughout the course of the weekend. And of course, later today, Rogue and Fnatic, they both found success with her in mid. Later tonight, these two top teams face off in the fight for first.
Rogue lost the last time they played Fnatic. It was day 3, week 1.
All eyes on these lineups to see what they will bring to the table this week.
I think we can beat any team, but I think competition is for sure way closer than it was last split.
Rogue has been playing astonishing this season, and I think most coming especially from Inspired, their jungler.
Here comes the Crow Storm!
Rogue are looking to cement themselves as the #1 in the regular season.
Schalke as Broken Blade's gonna look for something, but the Crow Storm prevents the engage. Now the chase forward as Inspired manages to leap over the wall.
Buipo, Hilisang are the guys that kill me the most. We'll just reach the backline, and the backline, who is in the backline is me. They are playing crazy.
1, 2, 3, 4!
Fnatic is a bloody team. Fnatic looking real clean right now.
So far, we're looking pretty hot, and I'd like to carry that momentum into the playoffs for sure.
No flash. It's double TP committed. Sensor Aura gets taken out. Oh, the Viego's going to be powerful in this one. If he can keep getting resets, he's going to start to take off. But Whipple's going to get burned down. But Whipple's going to turn right back in. He'll take on the way in. Whipple will not die. My God, it's an absolute slaughter.
I feel like we have a deserved spot at the top. We can beat anyone in the LEC and even contest for the titles.
Adam Hillisang straight onto Caps. Caps is gone, somehow surviving for the moment, but Hillisang almost down as well. The Requiem coming out. It's cancelled. Whipple on the front line. Reckless, you got to open up. You got to do the main things right now. He's looking for Niski. There's a couple of kills. 3 against 3 once again. Reckless flashing forward. Reckless dies!
But both these teams, incredible early game dominance, transitioned into a lot of very consistent wins. It's Rogue versus Fnatic. It's going to be an absolute banger.
It absolutely will be a banger, and the question that I'm going to go to Guldborg immediately with is, who is the best team in the LEC right now?
Why the hell are you asking me? Legit, why do you not just watch the game later yourself? Like, we will literally have it in front of us. I don't know why you comment to me like this.
Oh, why am I working with children? Okay, fine. Tell me about Fnatic, right? What is there to look forward to later tonight?
I definitely love the planning ahead of Fnatic right now. It's not something it's something we see with a lot of teams that they always try to do, but I feel like Fnatic is just so on top of their level when actually finding out what are the micros right now we're going for and what do they lead to in terms of when do we invade around a single skirmish? What is this setup we need around the lanes? I think they're essentially really good at playing around the pressure they get from their laning phases.
Now, Mr. Fry, turn your attention to Rogue.
Yeah, I can do Rogue. The thing is, Rogue have this guy named Odoamne, who many consider an MVP candidate. But in all seriousness, I think that Rogue, one of the biggest differences for me from their spring split to their summer season has been their bottom lane, right? You know, and they were always good, but Trimby coming in as a rookie has really found his footing. And they went from being a good, solid, you know, top of the table bot lane in spring to now the best laning 2v2 combination in summer, which is fun to see them go up against Hylissang and Upset on the other side, because those guys were the dominant 2v2 back in spring.
Now, of course, this will be the matchup that closes out the day in the fight for first, but we've got some incredibly key matches in the race for playoffs. Schalke and XL is going to be one of them. We're looking at Vitality going up against Misfits. Now, a reminder here that if Misfits pick up a win here, they will be in the spot for playoffs. We're talking a little bit about Vitality. I mean, Ender, you think this is a team that's going to take that 6th spot? How difficult will the matchup be today?
Well, it's not going to be an easy one, that's for sure. I think Vitality versus Misfits is a really big one. For Vitality, you know, they have lost the majority of their games the last couple weeks. I think 3 out of 4 have been losses recently. And Misfits, while they are one of those top teams, it's one of those teams that you feel like is maybe a little bit more vulnerable to being upset, apart from G2, who, you know, always a struggle for them against bottom teams. But Vitality, I think, again, need to see Selfmade playing active in the early game around his top side. That's going to be how they win today.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I definitely think Misfits are favored, in that game. Now, our opening matchup is between two teams in dire need of a win, XL and Schalke, who haven't won a single game in the second round robin. For Schalke, they now stand at 3 wins and 10 losses. Another 0-2 week could mean a very sad end to an otherwise great run in the LEC. There is still difficult matchups ahead. I mean, what are the prospects here for Schalke?
Yeah, I mean, it's not only that, it's also just finding their style, essentially, because it seems sometimes all over the place. You can see, again, some of the games they already have in front of them, right? Like, you need this game today against Excel as a stepping stone. We always talk about this in the Miracle one. It starts with that one single victory, and that's what we're out looking for today, for either team really here, that you need to pick up yourself the momentum that you need. You need to get that good feeling. In a team environment where you just take L after L after L, you need that one positive win to build up the foundation for the next games.
And on the other side of things too, right? Like Excel bringing in Marcoon and Advien, they showed up the first weekend, looked great, then they struggled to be able to find some wins for themselves. And I think that those two players made such a name for themselves in that first weekend. It can be a little bit tough to then get loss after loss after loss handed to you. This game against Schalke is a way to reset themselves going into the last 4 games of the season. Those two players, I do believe, have very, very bright futures ahead of them.
The thing that's very interesting to me is that if you turned the nameplates off and watched Excel from 2 weeks ago in 2 very hard-fought losses, they looked competitive, they looked scary. And then you look at their games from last weekend, you would bet money it's not the same team. So what are we going to see this weekend, Guldborg, and what's your expectations for XL?
Yeah, once again, in a meta like this, proactivity is such a pivotal part, especially around the top side of the map. My biggest problem for XL right now is that some of the fundamentals for them, at least being on the same page as the team members, sort of seem divided. At times when they set up fights for team fighting, they don't always go in on the same time. They're not always on the same page where they want to coordinate at the same. We saw this last week as well. So if they can fine-tune this trust, if they can go back and if they're reviewed, which we already know they will have, to find the momentum of these skirmishes that they create, specifically around Marcoon, I still think they have a shot.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Guldborg. You know, when they were setting up fights, they weren't all cohesive. They weren't all in sync, and everything was a little bit delayed in a sense. And I think that does make sense, right? It's a team that made some roster changes in the middle of the season. They had their brief honeymoon phase where everything looked good, and now that has to have been a huge focus for them during this week of play. Young Buck with the team needed to go back through that, be like, okay, what were the comms like going into those fights? How can we better communicate with each other so that we are going in at the same time? Because there were situations where there's like double TPs coming in and Advienne is on the wrong side of the dragon wall, you know, and getting knocked away by that. So all of these things have to be at the forefront of Excel's minds because they are having stronger early games than they did in spring. Now it's about showing that you can fight with the best of them, and it starts here against Schalke.
It is such a difficult task for both of these teams because ultimately both sides of the rift, both squads, both sets of players have a mountain of challenges to overcome to even have a hope at the postseason, as this is a must-win game. Let's kick off week 7 with Excel versus Schalke.